Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond Recovery. We're doing the first ever episode as a panel episode. So today we have Beth, Lucas, myself. My name is Matt, and we're going to be talking all things sobriety, recovery, a little bit about our own journeys, and a couple of topics to riff. So before we do, I'd like to introduce. So we'll do a little icebreaker here. So we'll start with Beth. So I'm thinking, let's say where you're calling in from. Time sober, and what is your favorite alcohol-free drink right now? So Beth, you can start us off, please.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Beth. I'm here from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I moved here about 4 years ago when I began my recovery journey from benzos and opiates particularly, but I was addicted to anything I could get my hands on for a couple of years. And what was the other question?
Yeah, so where you're from, time sober, and do you have a favorite alcohol-free drink right now?
Thank you. Yeah. My time sober is very ambiguous. I can't really put a number on it. I've been clean from opiates for 3 years, but have recently lapsed my sobriety from benzodiazepines. Did a little experiment on myself and came to the same conclusion that it's not for me. My favorite non-alcoholic beverage I actually have next to me, and it's called the Clean Cause. I'm not sponsored by them, but it's actually a yerba mate sparkling drink that supports, or 50% of the profits supports addiction recovery.
Wow. Amazing.
So,
I love it.
It's a pretty cool drink, under 60 milligrams of caffeine.
Yeah, I'll get you going. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much, Beth. Lucas.
Hi there, I'm Lucas Lowe. I am calling in from Tucson, Arizona, where I have lived for the past 15, 16 years, originally from a small mountain town in Idaho. And time sober is in January was 10 years. And yeah, my favorite non-alcoholic. So I like carbonated water, like sparkling water, and I recently bought a machine that makes it, just like I forget, SodaStream. That's
SodaStream.
Yeah, and so Topo Chico besides that, but right now it's been the SodaStream because it's much more economical and I can make my own little infusions and stuff, and nothing too exciting. Sparkling water.
Yeah, that's exciting to me. I'm all about the SodaStream. We have one as well. So yeah, my name is Matt Gardner. Anybody that's tuning into my show for the first time, Edmonton, Canada. I've been here for a while now, 22 years, I believe. I am alcohol free since April 2019. So a little over 4 years now for myself. And yeah, my favorite, as with Beth, I have my product placement ready. I'm not sponsored by Bubbly, but I do love myself a lime bubbly. So I'm about the SodaStream as well. So I was excited by that as well, Lucas. And I actually happen to have my favorite non-alcoholic beer here. So it's the Stanley Park. It's the Sunsetter. So it's a peach wheat ale. So I'm a big fan of that one. So I'm going to have that as my victory beverage as soon as we finish up here today. So awesome, guys and gals. Thanks for joining. Yeah, I've been excited for this. So I want to get into a little bit of our backstory, I guess the Reader's Digest version of our recovery stories, because I've had both of you guys on my podcast, long form. So Beth, your episode aired a couple weeks back, and Lucas, I believe yours is coming out very soon, within the next few weeks as well. So anybody that's tuning into this, you'll be able to see the long form versions of both of these folks' recovery stories. But before we do, it's just nice to, again, as sort of an icebreaker. So Beth, well, let's start with you, and just a little bit of a background on your recovery journey that you've been on.
Absolutely. Thank you for the intro. So my addiction story began, and I was just writing about my story. It began at a pretty young age. I was 16 and got into taking Xanax and Adderall, for fun at parties. And then I began taking them daily, thinking that they were helping me function better. And eventually started drinking. And then after graduation, started dating this guy. We actually moved to Tucson, Arizona for a little bit and got really heavily into the harder things, i.e. heroin and meth. And it kind of just snowballed into this. My life became just like complete chaos from the amount of drugs I was using, getting arrested, getting an OWI. And there was a time period finally where I ended up in jail. I was in a holding cell facing a felony charge. And as I was sitting in that holding cell, I kind of had this just like sobering moment, for lack of a better term. I feel like that's perfect, where I was actually sober in this instance. This was the first time I had gotten in trouble with the law where I was completely clear. It was just like a wrong place, wrong time scenario. And I just had this awareness, like, if I keep on this path, I'm going to die. You know, I've seen it happen to my friends. I have this bird's eye view of like how numbed out we are to the world. And I had this like deep internal feeling of wanting more. So I made this promise to myself. I was like, if I got out of here, which I didn't think I was going to, I'm going to make a change, you know? So I got out. It was only 2 days I was in there, and I went to outpatient treatment, and I met like a group of people who were struggling with similar things to me, even people who had like gone a few steps farther and like killed somebody in a drunk driving accident, you know, and being able to like connect with these people and see their humanity, even despite these like challenges they've been through and these like generally terrible things that they've done, and be able to like relate to that and understand that we are all like just doing the best we can with what we have. And we watched Brene Brown's Call to Courage, and Brene Brown in that documentary talks a lot about like getting into the arena and doing the hard thing and like being vulnerable. And I had this like full circle recognition of like my relation to substances was like this really weird, like, I can't think of the word. It's like two beliefs that conflicted. Like I was searching for love and connection while simultaneously consciously blocking myself from receiving that, and like completely shutting out my heart. And hearing about vulnerability and the power of vulnerability made me want to like push past what I've been experiencing and develop some sort of like platform to tell my story and to be more open with what I was experiencing. And that was like the breakthrough moment for me, was when I began like posting about and talking to people about what I was going through and what I had done, and like finding even more compassion and understanding on the other side. So I moved to Milwaukee 4 years ago after finishing outpatient, and found my community and have been developing deeper connections and deeper relationships with my community and myself as a result ever since then. So,
beautiful. Thanks so much, Beth. Thanks for sharing that beautiful story. I highly recommend. I posted it when your episode released on my story. That's one of my favorite all-time recovery stories that I've had on my podcast is yours. So thank you for sharing the Reader's Digest version again. Thank you so much. Over to you, Lucas.
All right. Thank you, Beth, for sharing that. And I will tune into Matt's podcast because I'd like to hear the whole story. So for me, I grew up in a small town in Idaho, and if you weren't into, outdoor sports, hiking and cycling, which I wasn't at the time, the alternative was like partying and driving out into canyons with kegs and throwing parties. And so I got into heavy drinking in high school and smoking pot and pretty like what was considered like innocent fun, and just never really grew out of it. And that developed into, and I got in a lot of trouble with the law. When I was 17, I got sentenced to an inpatient rehab and did a 28-day, your pretty typical rehab, driving around to various meetings, doing some therapy. I was diagnosed bipolar and like did medication for that. And so at 17, I got sober for, I think that lasted all of about 6 months. And I moved to Illinois during that time, to Chicago, and started working and picked up drinking again slowly, just thinking like, well, I'm only 18. Like, of course, I just, change of scenes and I should be fine now. Like I'll keep it under control. And that worked okay for a couple of years, and it would just slowly get, I'd be fine. And then one night I'd just lose control and make bad decision and get in some trouble, or, make an ass of myself. And ended up moving back to Idaho, reconnected with old friends, got into a little bit harder. Some of my friends had graduated into coke and heroin and Hills and stuff like that. And so I dabbled around in that community and maintained drinking and pot the whole time pretty consistently. And really what did it was just like the progressive downward. It wasn't this like gutter drunk or living, homeless or anything. I always maintained a job. I ended up getting married and starting a family during all this time, moved to Tucson, had a house, like by all means successful on paper. I just couldn't turn it off once it was on. And so it led to a weekend where I had set this whole, I hadn't partied with my buddies in a while. So I made up this whole weekend for my wife to go away to her mom's and take our new baby and our 2-year-old daughter up to visit mom a couple hours away. And then I had a plan with all my buddies, and we got a bunch of Coke and we got a bunch of booze, and we went out, and I ended up in jail and with a felony drug charge and disturbing the peace and fighting and all kinds of just a bad night of bad decisions. And spent the whole morning waking up in jail, like coming up in my mind with like all the stories and lies I needed to tell to navigate this. Like, how can I, tell my employer why I'm going to miss work, when I go to court, and how can I pay a lawyer without my wife finding out, and all about me and how I'm going to protect myself and keep my life the way it is, and no regard for like what I had done or anybody else's lives who I might be affecting. And I got home, and just the reality of like the consequences that I was up against was prison. I had a newborn son and a 2-year-old daughter. My wife was highly upset, understandably. She had already found out her brother, I thought I was like going to sneak under the radar, but everybody already knew, and was mad. And so I was already like, my life wasn't fantastic. And so I would say I was probably living in a little bit of a constant depression status. And so I just decided like, okay, I've got decent health or life insurance. If I like kill myself, this would be better for everyone, rather than try and figure the legal ramification, because I was like going to go to prison, and I was like, I don't want my 2-year-old daughter to come visit me, and I know my wife won't stick around for that. So everything I've worked so hard to build up until now is about to be taken away. I don't want to be here for it. And so I made that decision, and I called a buddy of mine who by chance had been sober a couple years more than me, and a good, like, one of my best friends from childhood growing up. And I helped get him where he needed to go when he was getting sober. And I just decided to call him to say goodbye, and like kind of, I don't know, looking for pity or something. And he convinced me to go to an AA meeting. And I don't, divine interjection or something, but I ended up at an AA meeting that night, and I'd been to AA and I'd done all that, and I was like, it's not going to work. It's beyond that, but I'll go just to like entertain him. Or I had this thought that maybe I could find a lawyer for free to represent me, or I don't know but I was reading like the basic pamphlet, and it just talked about, like, are you an alcoholic? Answer these 10 questions. And one of them was talking about like being brutally honest with yourself and others. And that sentence, or that, I don't know, that thought, that idea of being honest with myself and others was so like, it just cut through everything and took me to my knees. And I broke down in this lobby of this AA meeting and had a little emotional, breakdown, and decided right then, like, that's it. I have literally maybe a half of a chance to not lose everything if I completely give up my will to, at that point it was like the will of this particular group, like whatever anyone tells me to do when I walk into this room, I'm just going to do it no matter what. And I did that for 10 years. The first 3 years was religious, every single morning, 6 a.m. AA meeting, and listening. Every time someone gave me advice, I just did it, whether I agreed with it, whether I thought it was stupid or silly or not my style. I just was like, fuck it. I'm doing everything these people tell me to do, because I was in a room with people. Those early morning meetings have like all the old timers with 40 years and
Yeah.
really, really successful people. So that's what got me there. And that's what kept me going, was just listening to what other people who had been there before me told me to do, and just to the letter following their directions.
Yeah.
And that started a whole other journey of personal development, but that's really like the sobriety. The core of my sobriety comes from that first 3 years, and then I've built from that.
Yeah. Awesome, dude. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to your episode coming out. It's a very you capture both of that, the sobriety story, which you've sort of based this other, to say the 7 years after that, and what you're currently doing with personal development and the coaching that you're doing, it's a wonderful episode as well. So looking forward to that coming out. But thanks again for sharing it this time.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And just for me, I imagine people that are listening to my show are somewhat familiar with my story, but I'll just give a quick little recap of it. So I'd say over the last 11 years, I've had a grand total of close to 8 years sober, but I did have a conscious relapse. I figured I was cured after my first 3+ years of sobriety. I'm like, I got this. I said those 3 words. I remember saying that to myself at my friend's wedding. I got this. And I was just, part of me was just so shocked how quickly I had a shot of tequila towards the end of the night. I had been dodging it all night, and then finally I just had one, and I was so shocked how quickly like the old Matt came back, and made note of that. I remember driving home from the wedding, at 2 a.m. looking for the liquor store that's still open. I'm like, how did this get on top of me so quickly? Like I thought I got this, so I was like, it was very challenging for me and very demoralizing, and then I was trying to outsmart the addiction, you know what I mean? All these different crazy moderation techniques, like I only drink in the garage. So then all of a sudden I'm hanging out in the garage all the time. I'll only drink when I go out. So all of a sudden I'm going out 6 nights a week, only on weekends. And then weekends are every weekend's a 5-day weekend, mysteriously. And it was just, but I tried for years, like probably 3 years of like failed moderation techniques, or experimenting with moderation, we'll call it. Sounds a little more promising. And from there, I was 37. My dad passed away at 66, so which was to me is so young. And he was a heavy drinker from the time he was a teenager. I was literally just following the same path that he had more or less blazed for me. And on my way out to the celebration of life is when I was at my absolute lowest. It was one of those sort of perfect storm moments where I just come out of a party weekend. I'd been up till 3 a.m. the night before I left to go to a celebration of life. I was up doing cocaine and just drinking my face off and smoking cigarettes, which I hadn't done in years, and all this crazy crap. And I had definitely had like a spiritual intervention of some form there. I had an 8-hour drive ahead of me to get back home for the celebration of life. And about halfway through, I was like, I ended up picking up my phone and just started like saying some of the thoughts that were in my head. And I feel like just getting the energy moving was enough to make the shift. And the rest of the drive was very much like a solutions focused drive, and just building myself back up, repairing myself, going, hey, I've done this before, I can do it again. I'm going to do this for dad. I'm going to do this for the lineage of my dad's family, which has been just like generation after generation of alcohol abuse. It can stop with me. It will stop with me. And I was very happy there was something that definitely helped me. Whether it was dad or, a guide or however you may care to look at it. There's some kind of universe intervention type situation that went on that afternoon. I just so happened to be going through the Canadian Rocky Mountains as well. So it was just this beautiful spiritual area. So I really think there was something to it there. And I've been, sober ever since. And I'd say out of the 4 years, the last 1.5 or 2 years specifically, I've gotten really deep into the coaching. So I had a career change in there as well, and have been very much focusing on, I think that the recovery and sobriety is very much like the Joseph Campbell, like the hero's journey. And one of the most important parts of the hero's journey is after you've completed your leg of the hero's journey is you go back and help others get through their legs of the hero's journey as well. So I feel blessed and grateful that I have this experience now that I can go back and help people that are in early sobriety and recovery, or even a year or a couple of years in, sometimes the best coaches or the best mentors are people that are just a few kilometers up the road from you, right? And it's still fresh in their mind. They're like, ah, yes, I remember a few months ago where I was like this. So I definitely am feeling that these days, and just, yeah, really grateful to have a clear head. And, you know, it's not to say that some of these challenges don't come up. And I think that's a great way to segue into, you know, the first topic that I wanted to go over with you guys is just the word challenges, right? And I'd love to just start with that and just start with, like, you know, for me, let's go, like, we could just go around the horn here with like early challenges, because I know there's going to be a lot of like sober, curious people that are going to listen to this. And I, you know, all the outreach I've been doing recently, that's one of the first questions I ask is like, what are your challenges right now? And I've been finding that there's three distinct common challenges that seem to capture pretty much everything that like people are going through. But I'm just curious what was your guys' early challenges for your recovery sobriety? And Beth, we'll go to you.
Awesome. That's a great question and a great place to start. And I wanted to thank you both and recognize you both for sharing your stories. My earliest challenge, and this is like a recent integration, something that I've gained from Enlifted in particular, but also from my external communities, is like a sense of family and belonging was where I feel most of my challenge arose from, was not really knowing exactly where I fit, especially because I got into drugs so young. I'd never really like developed like a direct passion or like a creative endeavor or something I was working towards. It was kind of like I began experiencing mental health issues like anxiety and depression really early on. So my focal point became partying, numbing out, and drugs. So like in reflection, I realized what I was searching for was connection and family and support. And I was believing I was finding that within these groups of people that were doing the same thing I was, like drugs and drinking on the weekends. Like that was where I felt loved. And when I think about the earliest times when I first started drinking and engaging with drugs, it was like I was convinced those were the best times of my life. I was convinced that I was like, it doesn't get better than this, you know? And then when it started to become not so fun, it was like, oh God, it doesn't get better than this. So I would say like one of my earliest challenges was definitely lack of like connection and lack of knowing how to find people to be like myself with. That was another thing, is like being high or being drunk. I felt like I was so fully expressed. I was like, this is what it is to be expressed. You know, I don't give a fuck what anyone thinks about me. So it was like just this maladaptive like way of believing I was being expressed and like owning who I was, but I had no idea who I was. And it took like getting away from substances to recognize the parts of myself I had banished to like the shadow realm of like, this is too much or not enough, or like there was so much shame I was holding secretly around who I was, to the point of needing to get high, to like when the drugs were gone, it was just like this tower moment of uncovering what it is that I had been hiding from internally into, you know, the glow up of finding my community. But yeah.
Very cool. Awesome. Thanks. I love that. Yeah. Connection. That's so important, right? And just the idea of, yeah, that arrested development. You have like, I think it sounds like all three of us started fairly early on in our, you know, like mid-teenage years. There's so much that development that was essentially put on pause, right? While we're doing all these other experiences that we believe are like you say, like this is life, this is me fully expressed, right? Until it turns on you and you realize, okay, and not so much, right? So yeah, interesting stuff. Thanks, Pat. How about for you, Lucas?
Yeah, a couple came to mind. One that I remember really clearly in the beginning was I didn't share this part of my life, the recovery part, with anyone, like my family, my close family, my mom, my wife, you know, close family and close friends knew that I had gotten sober, but I didn't tell them that I went to AA every day and had a sponsor and worked to set, like that part of my life was just for me and that community, which I did find this community of support, which was great and imperative. But I also maintained an identity, you know, through work, friends, and, you know, our social circle, where it just became, and so the reason that became a challenge was in that social circle, you know, where I had been the life of the party and drank, to just be like, oh, no, thanks, you know, and turning drinks. Like, I didn't have the vocabulary or the confidence to fully announce, like, I'm sober. I consciously choose not to drink alcohol or smoke pot or whatever the thing is. And so I stumbled with those words a lot, and I had to, and for me, like, one of my I don't know, character traits or coping mechanisms was humor. So I came up with like funny little sayings like, oh no, I'm allergic, I break out in handcuffs, you know, and kind of to allude to like, because a lot of people were like, oh, you don't want a beer, and then like 20 minutes later, like, hey, I'm going to get another beer, do you want one? And it's like, I got tired of like having to say it over again. And in the past, that was where I slipped, was like, fuck it, I don't want to have to explain to them, I'll just start my stopping drinking over again. So this time I was much more committed, like on a deeper, you know, spiritual, emotional level, but it was definitely a challenge. And then the second one was, oh, I lost my train of thought, but the second one had to do with the dang, totally just lost it. It's kind of two in one. One was I didn't change my social circle. Like, a lot of people I knew that went to AA stopped hanging out with their social circle and just embraced the AA family and went to the AA cookouts. And I didn't do that. Like, I maintained my separate life and had an AA life, and that conflicted on multiple occasions where, oh, that's what the second one was time. Like, I had an immense amount of guilt for the amount of time I took away from my family, away from my friends and work for recovery. I had committed, and I made it my mission to show up at those meetings every day, and to show up for people, you know, day one sobriety that needed rides to meetings or needed someone to walk them through the steps. And that took away from raising my kids, not in a detrimental way, but there were times where it was like, I can't go to the school presentation, like, this person needs my help, or this, I can't miss this meeting because I don't want these people. And so I do believe there's like a fine line to walk of like, committing to recovery is a selfish act, and it requires you to spend time and money and attention on yourself and no one else.
Yeah.
And a lot of people I've seen stumble where they're just like, oh, my wife's pissed that I have this meeting every day, so I'm going to stop going on Thursdays. And then it's like, well, I'm going to stop going on Wednesdays too, because she, you know, I need to be home for the kids or whatever. And it's like, I get it. I went through it with young children in the house, like infant son. And it was important enough to me that it was like, I'm sorry, like, if we have to hire a babysitter, I know that you're going to miss work or whatever. I can't not do this. Like, this, I will die or go to prison. That was what I convinced myself. If I don't show up at this meeting every day, I'll be dead or in jail.
Wow.
So
yeah, no, it's powerful stuff, man. I can really relate to especially that first one. Like, for me, and it's easy to segue into that because I had a very similar challenge. I felt there was still two distinct sides to me, right? And I was very protective over who I told, for very similar reasons to you, I imagine, Lucas, as far as, yeah, just the job I was at. I was like a, you know, fairly high, or so I perceived it to be, like, you know, assistant store manager of in a retail group. And I felt that it would be viewed as a weakness or used against me. And I was very still concerned about like what other people would say about me. So I was very hush hush about my own recovery and sobriety. And as a result, you know, when I did have that relapse at my friend's wedding, it was for that exact reason. I was doing very similar to what you're saying. I'm, you know, cracking some jokes. And then after 5 or 6 hours of being there, I'm like, you know what, like, whatever, fucking, I'm just going to do it. So yeah, that was definitely a challenge. And that's the big difference this time around. As soon as especially after I put myself out of that previous career, it's for the first time I've ever felt like whole. Like, there isn't two sides to me, because there was always two sides to me, the drinker Matt and then the sober Matt. And after I removed the alcohol, there still was like work Matt and like artist Matt, or, you know, true self Matt, we'll call it. And there's always a little bit of clashing, you know, throughout my entire life up until recently. So now it just feels like there's this oneness that has occurred. So getting a little ahead of myself, but like in early sobriety, that one was definitely one. I definitely relate to what you said, Beth, as well. Connection. I felt that was like my ticket to connection was drinking, right? I was very shy growing up, so I needed that. So finding that out about myself. Honestly, the one for me though, the biggest one that comes up is yeah, the emotions part, you know, like I honestly think I was better at, like, my parents divorced when I was 13, and I'd say between 13 and 15 I was actually getting very competent with sitting in like darker shadow work, and like, you know, that's a pretty developmental age, just getting into high school. Like I started high school in grade 8. We had 8 to 12 where I grew up, and I was getting like used to feeling sad, lonely, and I was, you know, using music to help like get that out of me in a more abstract and healthy way. And then I added the alcohol and the pot and the psychedelics and such. And initially I thought, oh, this is like giving me this whole other element of artistic, you know, quality. And then not realizing that that was just starting to it was the slow descent, like pushing those feelings down inside of me, you know. And I'm just realizing that recently. So I would say it's like my ability to expose myself and experience some of that shadow work. I'm realizing it's really shown up in like patterns of behavior now. So it like echoed from that time period where I started numbing it when I was like 15, 16. And it shows up in patterns of like achievement, for example. Like if I start feeling lonely or some of these other feelings that I used to numb with alcohol, my new pattern is all like, oh, I'm going to go on the computer and like open up 5 tabs, like on Instagram, Facebook, like, you know what I mean? I'm just going to like distract and achieve until those feelings go down. So I have this new numbing agent that I found. So again, getting a little advanced from like the initial, you know, part of the question, but it was definitely that. It was the emotional side of things, the pausing of my development to be able to do like my own shadow work, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's what comes up for me.
That's really powerful recognition and understanding how it's like the behavior pattern can still open up in present reality as like, how am I distracting or numbing out the things now? And yeah, 100%. And Lucas, I really resonated with what you said about like early on, like finding ways to validate like a lapse in sobriety and just saying like, I'll just start over. That's been my relationship with nicotine out of nowhere, and like finding environments where I'm like, you know, like I started working food service again, and I realized food service is a huge trigger for me to smoke or use nicotine gum, because it's like, this is my break, like I can justify doing it here, I don't do it outside of here. But the ways that it can like sneak up on you, and like the ways our minds can be like, it's fine, we'll just start over, we could do it, you know, this amount of time, we can do it for this amount of time again.
Right. Yeah.
The one that when you were saying like the, you know, 5 hours of cracking jokes and finally giving in, like the difference for me in the first like 3 years of my sobriety, when really no one knew it, and to when I started sharing openly about it and like just making that my true self, was, you know, in the first 3 years, if someone offered me a drink and I took it, and people in my social circle saw me drinking, no one would think anything of it. Like they had heard me, you know, turn down a drink or two here and there, but I don't think it was really like, if any of my friends, close friends, really anyone that I socialized with saw me with a drink in my hand, they would like run up to me like, whoa, are you like, what's going on? You know, like, and that's a big, you know, as far as community and connection, is like, people know what my challenges were. People know how serious I am about it. And if they saw me sacrificing in that way, they would question it right away. And that's like, I don't know, a metric I use to like gauge, like, okay, I'm in the right social circle. These people actually, whether they drink or not, because I have friends that drink socially and they're fine, and that's great. But they see me and they know me. And if they saw me with a drink in my hand, they'd be like, hold the phone, what's going on, man? So I I think that's a big, once you start, like you said, sharing about what you've gone through and finding the people that are there to support you and that understand really what you went through, more so than just like, oh, I quit because I don't like the taste of beer anymore. It was like, no.
Yeah. Definitely. That's great. I feel like I jumped ahead a little bit with my answer, and I want to get your guys' take on it too, because we did talk about like early recovery or early sobriety. What are this is a great way to give some insight to folks that are maybe a year in or a couple of years in, or even the people that are starting their journey. What kind of challenges are still coming up for you guys? And, I got into more of my advanced stuff that I'm working through right now, like in real time, right? These patterns that are showing up that have replaced but basically what's left after the alcohol has been removed. I still have these like addictive patterns that I'm working through. So what is it for you guys? Like, so Beth, does that resonate with you? Do you have something that's more or less replaced? It's like the Indiana Jones thing. You took this thing away, but you put something back there, and now you're like, okay, now I'm working on this thing. Tell us a little bit about that.
Definitely. I found certain environments to be challenging. In particular, I used to really enjoy going out to live music events, particularly electronic music, but I found that that's like a weak spot for me. So like I can go for like an hour and then I have to leave. But because everybody's like smoking and drinking and utilizing ketamine or MDMA, and I'm like but one thing that I found I'm like replacing my addictive tendencies with is food, like overindulging in food, particularly sugar. And I recognize that when I'm in that space of like utilizing sugar or snacks or whatever it is, I will like do a little check-in and be like, what do I actually need right now? And it's like, where am I not nourished? Because that's usually what it is. It's like I'm trying to like find nourishment in ironically unnourishing things. It's like, what am I lacking right now? Oftentimes it's conversation or connection. But I also catch myself using social media, like you said, a lot, or like wanting to achieve a certain amount during the day to feel like I've done a good job. Or yeah, that tends to be it. Those are the two big ones: food and social media, like finding external validation in some way, even if it's not like a heart-centered, heart-guided mission to like create something. Sometimes I notice it's just like this dramatic urge to like do something, to produce something. It's like a worthiness thing.
I totally get that. I resonate with that a lot. How about for you, Lucas?
I agree with what Beth and shares a lot of that. The live music for a while became tough. Any place where there was alcohol was a really big challenge for me for several years. Like, and I had this chip on my shoulder about it. Like, these fucking drunks, like nobody should be drinking. That was kind of. And even it created challenges in my marriage with because my wife is not an alcoholic, and she enjoys a glass of wine with dinner or has a few drinks and even gets tipsy with her friends. And for a long time it bugged me, and I I preached and prophesized that this is the path, and the only way to be productive in life is to be sober. And I would say, I hit a point in my personal development, and it was said, I knew this like logically all along, but it hadn't really integrated, or I hadn't embodied or taken this in and really lived this truth, is that I can only control myself, and the serenity prayer, like right there, it's just like, I said it over and over again, and I understood what it meant, but I couldn't live that way. Like, I still needed to assert my control where I thought it needed to be. And so that was the biggest, like, and that showed up, the same, like food. I also went down the path of changing addictions. I got really into exercise and going to the gym and bodybuilding and diet and weighing my foods and being crazy like that. And then I mean, any form of escape I could get my hands on once I didn't have substance to grant me that. So social media, porn, exercise, whatever, video games. And in the past 5 years, I would say I've dove deep in my personal development, and I'm not a saint or perfect, but it's really been, and Unlifted did a huge number on this, like taking away this victim that people are doing what they're doing to like trigger me or spite me was really powerful. And that I feel day to day, for the most part, it doesn't come up. Like I don't turn to that as like it's just gone as a solution. Like I have the thought, like I could go out and buy a bottle of Jack Daniels right now. But the difference between 5 years ago and today is the 5 years ago me would be like, that would be interesting, or that would be fun, or like, oh, that might help. And now it's just like, I know that where that goes, and it's just not like, no, it's not, that won't help. Like anything but that. So yeah, I was trying to really think of what the like relating to sobriety, you know, I think just as my children are growing and my wife and I have gone through this huge identity shift. She walked away from her business she started for 15 years and started a new business, and I started into coaching in this business. And so there's been stress. Like we're in the thick of startup phases of a couple businesses, and money's tight, and the kids need things, and their social lives are starting to blossom, and they have sports and social activities. And so just being everywhere all at once has been a moment that I can recognize in myself of like, oh, if I had substances as a solution, this would be where I would be heavily triggered. Like it's crazy. Like, I don't know if either of you have kids or family, but it's like, shit, it's no joke. You know, it's a full-time job. I don't know how anybody does this, like on their own, for one, or like without, you know, tons of, like, it's expensive, it's time consuming, it's a lot of work, and a lot of resources are required to like do this. So that's kind of where I'm at, is I feel very emotionally, you know, I do have my roller coaster days and weeks and months and stuff, but I feel relatively stable and secure, and I fucking love that. Like that's the power of this type of work, of sobriety, and just like emotional intelligence and healing, any modalities. And we've done it all, you know, crystals and meditating and whatever you got, dump it on me, because it's done nothing but improve my life.
It's amazing, man. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's bring her in for a landing here. Beth had a great idea before we hit record about just, you know, giving out our mission statements now, whether that's we said the magic word there, Enlifted, right? So we're all three of us are Enlifted coaches. We're all coaches and mentors right now. So, you know, whether we want to just say a little bit about your business as well. So we'll go around the horn as well. And also, Beth, if you can just throw where you are most commonly found on social media, if somebody wants to reach out to you as well. So we'll end off with that. So Beth, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Lucas. That was beautiful. Congratulations on all of the new endeavors, both you and your lady. Very good stuff. You can find me on social media on Instagram under Ebb and Flow Integrations. What was the next question?
Perfect. Yeah. I'm Mr. 3 questions at one time here. My apologies. So next question would be like, what's your mission statement? So, and that can be mission statement of your business or just personal mission statement.
Sure, absolutely. You know, it's a working title. I'm still navigating my niche. Lately, I've been working with mostly people in recovery or out of, well, it depends on how you perceive recovery to be a continuous journey or not. But people who are still stuck in the identity piece, which I feel is so important, and something I learned from Enlifted is like, even when you're multiple years out of your addiction, it can be hard to like find that new identity, that like there's nothing wrong with me, negation acknowledged. But like I've been working with mostly people who like still hold some limitation around who they are and what they're capable of. So my working mission statement is I help dreamers become achievers through acknowledging and healing their unique wounding so we can learn how to trust ourselves and unlock the confidence required to create the life we want.
Ooh. Goosebumps. I love that. That was tremendous. Thank you so much. That's great.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course, of course. Lucas.
All right. Yeah, so I'll go with the business plug. I have a coaching company that I call Progress Engineer. And I worked in aviation for years before coaching. And I liked the idea of being able to solve complex problems with machines. And I apply the same principles in my life of just like this. It could be anything. It's like these emotions aren't working. This relationship's not working. My dryer's broken. My bike needs repair. Like there's always a set of steps you can take to make progress, to keep moving forward. And I don't know. So Progress Engineer on Facebook or Instagram. I have a website that's startandkeepgoing.com. And the mission statement that I settled on and that I, it took me a minute to wrap my head around like what, vision and mission, and those are important pieces. And it's really, I have it in my head, but to articulate it. So to empower individuals to be engineers of their own lives, leveraging the power of mindset, self-discovery, and inspired intentional action to provide transformative coaching that disrupts mediocrity, fosters boundless personal growth, and enables individuals to create remarkable legacies. And that's my personal mission too, is like, I want to be the engineer of my own life. I want to solve the problems and leverage the tools and resources I have to create this like limitless life.
Yeah. Powerful stuff. I love it. Both you guys have these amazing mission statements. I love it. Like I think to your point, Lucas, our mission statement for a business is very reflective of the end work that we're doing on we're our own guinea pigs in a way, right? We're the patient zero or model zero, right? So yeah, good point. Very good point there. Awesome. And for me, recovery roadmap. I love the idea of recoveryroadmap.me on Instagram. I love the idea. Just the roadmap to me feels like road trippy and just like the journey of recovery, focusing on a journey versus a destination, which is a lesson that I'm, learning myself after being so destination based and achievement based, right? And so it reminds me, and it's very grounding to me to have that like a concept or idea of a roadmap. And so my whole thing is I help high functioning drinkers change their relationship with alcohol to rediscover who they truly are. And my personal mission statement is to rediscover and discover who I truly am, really at all costs. I'm willing to do whatever uncomfortable thing I have to do, whatever healing modality I have to do to find out who I'm supposed to be. Supposed might not be quite the right word, but who I truly am, my true self, and reveal that and pull. It's kind of like the Michelangelo's David, like pulling away everything until all that's left is the true me. So that would be my mission statement for myself. So both of you, thank you so much for coming on. This is great. I had, I'm going to say high expectations because I'm trying to get out of the expectation business. But I felt very good about it. And so thank you both for coming on, and let's do this again. I have, I don't know if we talked about this at the beginning. We're going to do an Instagram live here coming soon, little foreshadowing. And we're going to do it on, what was the subject again, guys? It was a really good subject. Somebody remind me.
I forget.
What our unique idea of like sobriety is.
Yes.
It was like,
oh yeah.
That's it. Thanks. Yes. What is sobriety to you? Because like, what is, to me, it's like in the same kind of niche of like health. Like, what is health to you? Like, personal training is so nuanced to a person's body and makeup and the way that they, their diet and so much. So I think recovery is like that too. It's there's a little more gray area than in recovery than say AA provides. And again, AA saved my life. Sounds like it saved, Lucas' life. But there's definitely something there. So let's get into it. So thank you both. And any parting words before we stop for the day?
No, thanks for having me. I had a great time and look forward to more discussions.
Absolutely.
Thanks for taking a dive with me, guys. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Take care, guys. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.